All right, hello, this is Mr. Manning, and this video is going to be going over a few new tools in Photoshop. We're going to review how to use the Move tool. We're going to talk about how to combine two or more pictures together. We're going to briefly talk a little bit about layers, and then finally we're going to use the Free Transform tool and the opacity slider. All right, so we got a lot to do. We're going to jump into it right now. For this particular lesson, I'm going to be using two pictures at once. Everything else that we've done so far in Photoshop, we've always been using just one picture. Today we're going to change that. We're going to be using two. So I need to open both of the pictures. The first one I'm going to open up is called the bus. And then the second one I'm going to open up is called the nutmeg label. With this one already open, I'm just going to go to File, Open, choose the nutmeg label, and open it as well. Photoshop actually puts tabs up here across the top when you have more than one thing open. If I want to go look at the bus, I can just click on that tab, and it brings the bus into my workspace, and vice versa if I want to look at the nutmeg label. Okay, I'm actually going to start with the nutmeg label. And for this particular lesson, we're going to have kind of a scenario. We're going to act like that we work for an advertising company. And this company right here, Outlander Spices, has hired our advertising company to do some ads for them. And one of the things that they want to do is they want to put a banner along the side of a bus. I don't know if you guys have ever been into the city or been somewhere where they do this, but a lot of times companies advertise along the sides of buses. So we're actually going to put a banner along the side of this bus. However, the people at Outlander Spices say that they want to see what it's going to look like before they decide to spend a bunch of money. So you, being a really good graphic designer, can give them a quick preview of what this would look like. All right, so we are going to first use the Move tool. And to be able to move anything in Photoshop, you have to first select it. So we're going to take this Adding Spice to Your Life, and we're going to move it so that it's up here next to Outlander Spices. All right, I don't care that it's against the black background. In fact, that's probably good. So when I select this, I'm just going to use my rectangle selection tool. So I'm going to zoom in just a tiny bit. I'm going to grab my rectangle selection tool, and I'm going to draw a rectangle selection box around Adding Spice to Your Life. All right, once that's selected, I am going to go up to my Move tool. It's the very top tool on the left. I'm going to bring it down, hover it above my selection until I get the little scissors that pops out. I'm going to do a left click and hold it and drag this up next to Outlander Spices. If you want to be really specific about where you want it located, you can use the arrow keys on your keyboard and it will just barely nudge it. All right, I want to try to line these up pretty close, so it looks like I've done a pretty good job. Once I'm happy with that, I'm going to deselect. So you can hit Control D, or you can go select, deselect. All right, now I am going to once again select this area using my rectangle selection tool. So I'm going to do a rectangle box around this whole thing. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now, at this point, I want to move this area that's selected. I want to put it on the bus. So I am once again going to use my Move tool. I click on it right up here on the top. And this time, when I hover my mouse above it, I get the little scissors. I am going to do a left click and hold it, and I'm going to drag it all the way up to the bus tab. I'm still holding left click. I'm going to drag it all the way down until I get a little plus that comes out by my cursor, and I am going to let go of my left click. When I do that, it drops my Outlander Spices banner onto the bus. All right. Now, I know that there's a few things that are wrong with this, right? There's absolutely nobody that would believe that this banner is on the side of the bus. It's too large. It's not in the correct spot. It's not at the same angle as the bus is parked. And the color is off a little bit. We actually need to adjust the color some. So we're going to do all of those things to make it look like this banner is going along the side of the bus. Try to fool people into thinking that it was always there in the first place. All right. Also, something else I want to point out right now. When we moved this banner over to our bus, Photoshop created a second layer. And I've talked a little bit about layers in this class before, but you can always see what layers you have down here in the bottom right-hand corner. And this is the first time that we've had more than one. We currently have a background layer, and it gives us a little thumbnail image of it, and that's the bus. And then we also have what's called layer 1, and that is the banner. All right, I would definitely encourage you to get into a really good habit of anytime you add a layer to your document that you name it. And naming it is super easy. It takes about 5 seconds. And if you do this every single time, it'll save you time later, and it'll just make you much more organized. So to rename this, instead of this being called layer 1, I'm going to hover my mouse above layer 1. I'm going to do a quick double click. Photoshop puts a white box around it, and it allows me to type. And I'm going to call it what it is. I'm going to call this banner. I can click anywhere I want, and it will always be called banner. Okay, something else with the layers. Whatever layer is currently in blue is the active layer. That is the only layer that I can work with. Just like whenever we were using selections and I told you that the only thing that you can adjust is what is selected, if you're using layers, the only thing that you can change is the active layer. So right now, I can make all sorts of changes, and my bus is nothing's going to happen to my bus because I do not have that layer active. If I wanted to change the bus, I would actually have to go down here and click on that layer before I made the changes. There'll be a lot of times you'll be working with Photoshop and you're trying to move something around, or you're trying to change the color of something or whatever, and it'll get frustrating because it's not working. And one of the very first things that I'm going to tell you if you ask me for help is, what layer do you have selected? And you're probably going to look over here and you're going to realize that it's the wrong layer. And that's okay. That happens, especially to beginners, and it even happens to me, and I've been working with it for a long time. Okay, we need to resize this banner. So I've got my banner layer selected because I want to work with it. I am going to change the size of this thing. The tool that I'm going to use is called the Free Transform tool. And there's two ways to get to the Free Transform tool. You can either go up to the Edit drop-down menu, and about halfway down you can choose Free Transform. Or over here on the right you can see that the shortcut for Free Transform is Control-T. Either way will work. As soon as I click on this, Photoshop puts a box around the area that I'm going to work with. Once it has a box around the area, I can do a lot of things to this. I can resize it, I can rotate it, and I can even do some three-dimensional stuff, which we're going to do in a moment. So the first thing I want to do is resize it. You can resize the layer from any of the corners or any of the sides. I would encourage you to always resize from a corner, and always hold the Shift key when you do it. This will keep the layer in its original proportion so it doesn't look stretched. So I'm going to hold down on my Shift key. I'm going to grab it from this top left corner, do a left click and drag, and make this layer much smaller. Oh, and I made just a tiny mistake. Luckily, it's easy to fix. All right, and I kind of want to size this so it is about the same size as the bus. It's not going to be 100% perfect, but I kind of want it to run along the edge of the bus here, this white area. Also, I know that it's not at the right angle. That's something we're going to change in just a moment. Now, I also mentioned that you could rotate using the Free Transform tool. If you take your mouse and you move it over to one of the corners, you get kind of a crooked looking arrow. And if you do a left click and hold it, you can actually rotate the layer. All right, so I want this to look believable. I want people to actually think that it goes along the side of this bus. So to do that, I actually have to make the banner look like it is going at the same angle as the bus. Luckily, Photoshop in its free transform tool has a 3D feature. When you have your free transform selected and you've got a box around your layer, you can hold Control on your keyboard, grab any of the corners, do a left click and drag, and you start to get some 3D effects. I always think this is so cool. It's one of my favorite parts of Photoshop. Now, once we're working with 3D, we can try to change this banner so that it is going at about the same angle as the bus. One thing you might be noticing right now is that as I work with this layer, it's starting to get a little choppy. It's almost like it's not clear anymore. Don't worry about that. As soon as I accept these changes, it's going to clear right up. Okay, that looks pretty good. It's at about the same angle as the bus, and I can kind of notice that it's running along the same edge as this black bar and the windows. So once I'm happy with the angle, I go right up here on my options bar. There is a little check mark, and I click that check mark to commit my changes or to accept them. So I hit the check mark. You can see that my banner cleared up quite a bit. All right. Now, at this point, it sort of looks like that banner has always been there. It's still off a little bit. If I was doing this for real, I probably would spend a little bit more time getting the angle correct. But for our purposes, it looks pretty good. The very last thing I want to do with this is I actually want to adjust the opacity of the layer. Opacity just means if the layer is see-through or not. Over here, right above your layers menu, so remember this is your layers, right above it there is an opacity bar, and currently my opacity is 100%. That means I cannot see through this thing at all. If I click this little side arrow, a slide bar comes out, and I can move the slide bar to the left to make the layer more transparent. So my opacity is no longer 100%. I can actually see through the layer just a little bit. One thing I think is useful for this is if you're trying to match up a color, or if you're trying to make it look like something is a little bit more like weathered, it's been there for a while. So we want to find a percentage that looks pretty close to the colors that are already there. I'm trying to match up like the black colors in the window and the black colors along the edge here. I think about 85% is good. Somewhere between like 83 and 88 are usually where I end up at. So now that I'm at 85, I'm going to click off and I'm done. I actually have created this preview for the customers, and this would give them a much better idea of what it would look like if they actually spent a bunch of money and had these banners put on the sides of buses. All right, so quick review. The things that we looked at during this video is we learned how to use the Move tool. We learned how to bring one photo to another. We also talked a little bit about layers. We talked about the free transform tool. That was the thing that we used to resize the banner and to put it at a different angle. And then the very last thing we did was we changed the opacity. Okay, thank you for watching this video.